Welcome to another Learning Council podcast. This is your host, LeiLani Cawthon, publisher at Learning Council of News Media and Research. And so our topic today is really what are the 7 keys to high quality math instruction? Now, the reason that we're going to talk about this is because scores in math, at least in the United States, are not really looking that great right now. And there's a lot of attention on it in schools. So I have with me today Dan Tracy, who's a leading expert in mathematics and education at Mind Education. He's going to share his insights on the biggest challenges in achieving high quality math instruction. So Dan, I know we've had you on the show before. We've shared your entire bio, but you really talk a lot about this neuroscience of what's going on in mathematical instruction. So before I have you start going on all this, let me just share a couple other things, okay?
Mhm.
There are people with calculators as part of their IEPs, their individual instructional plans, or kids. And there are ones that have calculators that are using them because they never learned their basics. So there's a lot of curiosity about what is the way we should really be causing the learning in math. And I want us to talk about it from that number one perspective. I know you're part of the neuroscience dialogue there at Mind Education. I mean, you guys are so impressive, as a company because you have a bunch of people that really get into this. So can we go down that road first? That's the number one of the 7, I think, that we're going to talk about today, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
So
And welcome.
thanks for having me. And yeah, when we think at Mind Research Institute, like what is neuroscience in as far as learning, I always try to get people to think like, okay, how did you learn to walk? And no one can tell you how they learned. They can tell you what they observe from children on how they think a child learns to walk, but they can't actually tell you what's happening in the brain because it is innately a doing activity. So like the child has to do the walking to learn to walk. And so when we talk about like how does neuroscience apply to learning, the first thing is that kids should be doing things right from the beginning when we talk about learning. It shouldn't be, hey, let me set you up and like create this environment. And then once I've created the environment, I'll explain the rules and then I'll let you go and do. No, it should be an immediate jumping in and starting to do. And the
Mhm.
reason that's important is because, especially when we talk about early learning activities, you don't know how you did them. Like, you cannot describe to me how you learned to count or to add. You can say what you observe that a teacher does in the classroom, but the learning in the brain is there's a specific thing that's happening and it's predicated on you actually doing things. And we're very slow to let children just do because we feel like we have to craft the experience. And so the first like aspect of a meaningful curriculum is a do it first curriculum, not a set it up, give them the right parameters, then start doing stuff. No, like immediately without any instructions, students should be able to do things.
Yeah, I like this. It's still a mystery. What is that neuroscience? But let me come back to that. Um, so you and I are exploring today 7 of the things schools and districts should be looking for. This is partly, what a teacher needs to be doing, but also what you just said, what a student needs to be doing. And the first one of these is really looking for something built on the foundation of neuroscience, right?
Mhm.
So how the brain actually operates. I cannot think there would be a full 7 if that one's the first. Like that would be just like I'd stop right there. Like obviously we need to know how the brain works. But there has been also maybe some conjecture out there in post-pandemic world. There's a lot of schools saying we lost years of learning, never, and they're never catching up. Basically, they're still struggling. When did the pandemic end? Was it 22, 23? It's
Yeah,
25
it
right now.
depends on which state you live in, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't make fun of it because it's something that maybe is still ongoing. We don't know. But the thing is that maybe if you miss a window of a certain age to learn your addition and subtraction or your numeracy. Maybe after that, you just, I don't know. So that's part of neuroscience. So talk to me more about the neuroscience before we get into the other six. Because I need to understand, like, is there other implications here, like age, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, you brought up something that I think is interesting. This idea that like, oh, if they and you everyone heard this phraseology like a learning loss, and it's interesting. Like every teacher has seen this phenomenon where a kid doesn't understand something. You explain it 35 different ways, they still don't understand it. So you're like, I have to move on. So the teacher moves on and then
Yeah,
randomly comes back to the idea. And then, like, out of like some miraculous thing, the student just gets it, right? The teacher didn't do anything extra. Kid just like all of a sudden gets it. And so
yeah,
one of the false assumptions is that like there's this linear step that every single kid has, where the reality is some kids will take giant leaps, some kids will take small steps. And so when we think about like the neuroscience of learning and like how do we build a curriculum on it? Well, the first thing is like let the kid do as much as you possibly can let them do. Like they need to be the active participant in the learning because a hands-on activity is learning. And then the next part is like when we talk about neuroscience, one of the major features is the amount of feedback that the student is getting in the timeline for that feedback. So the younger the student is, the faster the feedback needs to happen. And it needs to happen on every single choice that they're making, because that is actually how life works. As you make choices, you actually experiencing consequences of those choices. The faster we can give that feedback to the kid, the faster they're going to be engaged in what we call a learning loop, where they predict, they act on that prediction, they get an outcome, and then you either solidify or disconnect schema. And so then once they have a piece of schema built, then we take that piece of schema and we want to stack on top of it. And so like there's this like compounding approach that is that exact snowball that I was describing earlier, where a kid just like miraculously gets it. It's because they went through this snowball where they're like, oh, I stacked one idea on top of another, and now I have this more robust schema. So when we talk about neuroscience, we're talking about getting kids doing it first, giving them instantaneous feedback when they're young, slowly separating them from that feedback as they get older, and have the ability to kind of like recognize the feedback as it's connected to the choice that they made.
well, yeah, I like the way that you just sort of like layered that into my mind. And I'm thinking that what you're really saying, I'm just going to boil it down. So what you're really saying is that some kids, like your example, if you give this kid 35 times different ways and then they didn't get it, and then like, 2 days later, they're suddenly getting it. There's a lag in some minds. And then also the instant feedback thing, obviously, those two things, right? So sometimes there's a lag. Feedback makes a difference, right? So that's really important neuroscience right there. But I'm thinking, like, do you know those little balls that you have, like little, when you're a preschooler, you have little uh circles or squares or triangles you can push in through the holes. It's got to be a triangle hole for the triangle thing and a
Mhm.
square hole for the square thing and a round hole for the round thing. You can watch a toddler sit there with the different objects and poke them in the wrong place, and eventually they're looking at them and then they're going like this, and they're so it's a doing this, like you're talking about, like you're doing
Mhm.
something, and eventually they figure out that the thing has to match the hole that they're going to poke the little thing into, the little play object. Um, but there is a lag for some kids. I mean, you could sit and watch some kids do this and just keep putting the wrong one in the wrong thing. I guess this is the square peg round hole analogy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, they're just doing it wrong. And then eventually they get it, and then they're very fast, right? Which is a
Mhm.
which is really interesting, because other kids are just fast from the get-go because they're maybe mom's standing there and saying, hell, good, good, okay, no, 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 go, okay, good. But if no one's standing there, they're having to give themselves internal feedback, so to speak, like, that's not fitting. So there is a feedback mechanism, in other words. So those two things, like, I like these aspects of neuroscience, so that there is a lag sometimes, and that there is that feedback maybe accelerates. I don't know that we're in a position with whole group to give a lot of feedback all the time. What's your thoughts on that?
That becomes, I mean, that talk about like the task that's overwhelming to a teacher. That is an overwhelming task. And this is where everyone should be very encouraged to embrace technology because technology can very rapidly give kids feedback, very similar to like the kids operating on a tool. That tool is giving them feedback. I mean, think about if the tool was you try to put it into the hole, but
Mhm.
the kid get like is describing to you what they would like you to do. Like how incredibly frustrating would it be if a kid was like, I'm going to describe to you where I want you to put that square peg, and they're trying to describe it to you and they're lacking the language skills to do so, and so therefore like there's this disconnect even in that. So like the feedback is so slow because they're in the inability to communicate really effectively. This is why like giving kids the freedom to use whatever language they want inside of math, whatever side of like tools, and like by allowing them to determine tool set, both language and the actual tools, they actually are more invested. They're more willing to get that feedback because it's like their choice. And so one of the things, way to think about it is like it is much faster to teach someone to snowboard than it is to teach them to surf. And it's because like a good wave comes in like every 15 minutes, where every time you land on your butt on a snowboard, you get pop right back up and start it again. So the feedback is significantly faster, you can learn snowboarding much faster.
Well,
And
when I'm thinking about what feedback is mass, like actually having force and mass, right? In many instances, from the analogy you were just saying. And I was just realizing as you were saying that analogy, there's a lack of mass in most mathematical instruction. It's not the little play ball where you get the cube to stick in the hole, right? It's
Mhm.
literally all in here, right? It's in your mind. And
Yeah.
maybe you're given like the teacher puts three apples and on the table and says, this is three apples, this is one, this is two, and it gives you a mass. It gives you space
Mhm.
and mass where you can, and math basically is the language of mass, right? So
Mhm.
the lack of mass is very constraining. So,
Well, you
so
said
the
something just right
practice,
there that's so important, and I would love for everyone to start realizing this. So, like you said, oh, math is a language, right?
yeah.
And if I said, okay, what do you use language for? Language is used to describe things or to paint a picture of things in your mind, right?
Mhm.
However, if that means if math isn't an actual language, that means that math is a descriptor, and therefore we need to stop saying do the math because you would never say do the language. That's ridiculous. That's
That
absolutely
would be the wrong
ridiculous.
language.
Right. So
Yeah.
this is fundamental to what we do is if you have a model first approach to mathematics, it changes the way the students interact with the math because if the model is first, if the model is the most important thing, then the numbers are used to describe the model. But currently, what we see in almost every single curriculum, what happens is it's a numbers first approach. And everyone's experienced this. Like when you're in elementary school, you remember, okay, there's a word problem. You're going to circle what? Not the model, but the numbers. I'm going to circle the numbers as though they're the most important things. And they're not. They are describing something and they should be describing something. So, one of the key innovations that we constantly are pushing is a model first approach and where the numbers are describing the model and not vice versa.
That's an interesting outcome of the neuroscience of it all. And I think completely would affect how you would teach something. And obviously the models that mind education has in how you purvey learning through the screen, right? The
Hmm.
digital learning. Okay, well let's go to this next one. So the second one that you should use to be looking for is that it has to be effective for all student groups.
Yeah.
So explain that to me because I would think, well, obviously, like that's an obvious point. Why is it not obvious that it would have to be that? Like if I'm out there purchasing something for my school, curriculum base is going to help me teach math. Why am I looking for something that's effective across? What do you mean by all student groups? People with dyslexia, people with like,
Well, if it is built on neuroscience, then you're building, well, one of the phraseologies that we use constantly is we are not asking the question, how do you teach better? That's a good question. It's super important. It is pivotal to driving education forward. But the question that we've been asking is, how do you learn math better? And that is a different question with a very different outcome. One is focused on what the adult is doing, the other is focused on what the student is doing. And if you teach the way that the brain learns, it turns out that is effective for all students. And one of the things that we constantly hear, everyone knows this phraseology, like, oh, you got the implementation dip. So what they're basically alluding to is you adopt a new curriculum and all of your
Mhm.
scores somehow go down, even though you bought something that the assumption is that it is going to make your scores better. And what they would say to mitigate this is, oh, you got to do a lot of good teacher training. There's got to be this like phase in approach. But no one has ever phased in an iPhone into their life. They just get an iPhone and they pick it up and they start using it, and there's no dip in productivity. In fact, most people would increase in productivity. They have better access to emails, better access to communications. So
Mhm.
the notion that we should reduce our scores upon implementing a new curriculum is crazy. That's like, why would you, like, you buy a new car and the dealer says, well, the first year you'll get in a couple racks. And then after the couple racks, then you're going to become a fabulous driver because the car is going to really help you. No one would accept that premise. That's a crazy premise to accept. So one of the things that we're saying is it should work from day one and have a positive impact on student outcomes from day one. And the way you're going to do that is have this student first approach where the students are doing things right from the beginning. And so the idea is that every single kid can be proficient in math because every single kid has spatial temporal reasoning. And spatial temporal reasoning is the ability to take shapes and objects to manipulate over time and space. It's the foundation for higher level math thinking. So if we can get kids to engage in this type of thinking right away, we're not going to see that kind of dip, and it works for every single kid. So like when we pick curriculums, we shouldn't have to pick, well, I'm going to pick this curriculum for this particular type of student and this one for this particular type of student. Taught an overwhelming task that kind of violates what it means to be a teacher, where you're teaching all kids the same material.
Hmm. Okay, so all right, so let's do the next one, which is number three. It has to be able to empower educators. I think this is going to ring true with part of what you were just saying is like, why are we going to lose scores? I mean, that would make me very hesitant as a teacher, like another new curriculum. No wonder they run and hide and then just use the old one until you go away as a superintendent or director of curriculum instruction, hoping that they just hide it in the closet. They're like, oh, I didn't know it was in the closet. So anyway, obviously it has to give you a win as a teacher.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that.
I mean, so when we talk about empowering teachers, so one of the things is for the teacher to feel like I'm doing a good job and that I don't have to have like 4 hours of prep every single time that I want to teach my kids math. And so there should be this simplicity to the arc of the narrative arc of the curriculum, like where teachers go, okay, I generally know where we're going because I understand the narrative arc of what you're after here. That should be obvious to the teacher. It shouldn't be something they hunt for. It shouldn't be something that they kind of like, let me read every single thing that you wrote to figure this out. Like when you are in the middle of a story, most of the time you can predict what the story is going to do. Like that's why like a good suspense story that has like a twist ending is so appealing because you're like, oh, that's so neat. But like in general, when we talk about education, like the narrative arc should be pretty obvious for the teacher. So we need to empower them through ease of use, ease of implementation, and ease of understanding. Like the teacher should go, oh, I see what's happening here. And they should be empowered to learn the math alongside the student. And that's One of the things that I think is generally lacking, we want the teachers to be these incredible experts across every single subject at the elementary level. Whereas realistically, we want them actually learning alongside the students. They should like see models and be like, I never thought of it like that. That's a good thing. And we want to empower them to have that experience.
Yeah, and tell me the facts on, I don't know if you know this facts, but isn't it true that that's probably where we lose a lot of kids is the elementary level? Where you have to
The
be
overwhelming majority.
multi-subject expert?
Once they get out of elementary and they don't have foundational math skills, it's almost impossible for us to catch them up. I mean, it's not impossible, but it feels that way for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's a study out by this individual named Duncan, and he basically laid it out like your early math skills are the leading predictor of academic success. They're their leading predictor of financial success, of post elementary math success. So, um, your math scores at the early stages are pivotal, and we as a nation, as a educational community, should be investing significant amounts of effort inside of that space.
Yeah, for that window. Okay, all right. So that was number three. So number four is that what you should be looking for in high quality math instruction is a curriculum that cultivates a joy in mathematics. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, well, one, you should enjoy what you're doing. And math is actually quite fun as a descriptive tool to describe the world and make predictions around the world around you. Language, like ELA, does not allow you to make predictions about the world. That is the power of math language. It actually allows us to make predictions. So there's a lot of fun in math. And I feel like because there's a lack of understanding of math, that kind of fun gets drained out of the system. So I guess there's two aspects of like you should have joy in math. One, the students should enjoy what they're doing. Like math is genuinely fun. If you talk to anyone that has high level math degrees, they're like, yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's why I did it. Like I didn't do it because I had this like actuary job in mind. I did it because I enjoyed myself, and like that's what they did. So there is a ton of fun in it, and when we get to this place where kids are doing less, well, it becomes less fun. We know this at Mind Research. One of the things I talk about a lot is how much fun kids have when you just say, "Hey, go play," and there's no other instructions. It just speaks to the heart of a child to not be told what to do and just have the freedom to explore. So that's again kind of going back to that do it first idea. Like kids need to be doing things right from the start with limited to almost no instruction and let them have experiences. But then the next part of the joy is like the teacher. Like it is really hard to have fun when the person that's supposed to be leading the classroom is not having fun. And so how do we get teachers
So true.
to enjoy themselves? Like teachers should,
Mhm.
oh, I get to teach math today. Like this is going to be tons of fun. And like
Yeah.
part of that fun is like one, do they recognize that kids are making gains? And like part of the reason that teachers have a hard time recognizing students making gains is because students are not doing enough. Curriculums are not designed for kids to do enough. And so like we want them doing as much as they can because then the teacher goes, oh, that kid, I see things that are happening inside of that child. There's nothing more fun for a teacher than seeing those kind of moments. And so when we talk about cultivating a joy, it's like, well, we want both the student and the teacher to have joy. And the way we're going to do that is by having like meaningful math experiences. There's one of the ways to suck all joy out of everything. Yeah. So like one of the Chinese torture methods was for that what they would do is that they would have people dig a hole and then fill it in and then dig another hole and fill it in. And with almost no meaning. Like, so it's basically the labor you're doing is completely meaningless. And that is sometimes how the math classroom feels. But all of a sudden, if we say, hey, we want you to focus on the model and then use math and numbers to describe the model, the math all of a sudden has this incredible meaning to it that it didn't have before. And, if you're like, oh, well, what are you talking about? What does that look like? So we have these puzzle talks that everyone is allowed to have access to for free. And you can kind of see exactly what I mean. Like the model is the most important thing in math, and the numbers should describe said model.
So Mind Education, you guys have some free puzzles out there. That's great to know. I'm thinking as you're saying that what the difference between regular language learning is language is qualitative. It's descriptive about things that we see around us with a lot of language, right? Like a lot of different words that mean different things.
Hmm.
Whereas math has got a very narrow set of symbols and it's quantitative as well as dimensional, right? So as a language, it's very complementary to regular language because it's going down that quantitative, how many bricks are in the wall? Why don't you sit there and count them, right? Like,
Hmm.
that would be fun, right? I would find that fun as a kid when I was 7, right? Like, I'll count the bricks, you know? But not having it explained to me that I can use numbers to explore my world, right? Like, there's this many geese on the lake, mom, or there's this many trees around the lake, like, I don't get it, right? Like, it just looks like symbols on the board that the teach. So I understand what you're saying. It has to be joy in it, which is adding, something to it that I don't think we ever had when I was young. So I'm excited. I wish I was young again. I want to be, I want to be part of your program. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, so number 5, what you should be looking for when you're looking at math curriculum is something that has mathematical discourse. Something that promotes a mathematical discourse to make math discourse easy. What do we mean by that? So the talk between the teacher and the students, or in your own mind?
Both.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, I mean, so um, when you like put something out into the world, you become invested in it, right? Like if I make a
Mhm.
statement, and this is why, like, it's really interesting and fun to be around someone that's like willing to like be wrong, and you like that way you're like that's what makes a discussion interesting rather than a lecture where it's like I'm right, I will tell you how to be right, and this is what being right looks like. Um, and so discourse requires a level of safety because if you're going to throw your idea out there and it's a wrong idea, it has to be, you have to be willing to let it be challenged. So, one of the things when we think about discourse is how do you create an environment where the kid is almost like, well, I'm just going to throw this out there to see if it's right, right? That is a different methodology than saying, hey, who knows the answer to this? It's
Mm,
how do you create a space where the student's like, well, I just got to see if this is right. I'm going to put it out there. Well, one of the simplest ways to do that is inside of a game environment because the
mhm.
students almost anticipate that they're supposed to get it wrong, and
Yeah,
in getting it wrong, they're supposed to get information back from getting it wrong. So one of the key mechanisms that we do is we always are letting kids play these games where they're just like making conjectures and testing those conjectures and getting feedback because the mechanisms that you're used with the game. So when we create discourse, we're going to start by saying, hey, let's find a safe space where like we're just playing a game together. And the things that the teacher can do with a game are the teacher can actively be wrong. And it's very unthreatened, like or like non-threatening, I guess, for a teacher to be wrong when playing a game because you're just playing a
it's a
game.
game.
And then the
Yeah, we're just
kids
playing a
get
game.
the opportunity to make that critique. Then you kind of create this environment of like idea, critique. And in a game environment, that works phenomenally well. Anyone that's played games or used our puzzle talks will attest to like it's very easy to get conversation around a game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it gets your attention if you're in a game and not just doing like a worksheet. Okay, so let's go on to number 6 and then we'll do number 7. So another look for when you're looking to buy math curriculum is it has to be a curriculum that leverages formative feedback.
Mhm.
So talk to me about what that means. So formative feedback is step by step, like as you're learning through each part of what you're learning. So maybe like in fractions, you're describing to me what this line is, the denominator line is, so I don't get screwed up on that as we go.
Let's use something that everyone knows. Angry Bird.
Okay.
Everyone's played Angry Birds, right? So
Mhm.
when you play
Angry Birds? Angry
Angry
Birds.
Birds, that game
I
where you're
know
like
the
shooting the
movie.
birds and you're
And I've,
knocking them.
yes, it's scary for me to shoot birds, but okay. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
because you're
so
holding
like,
this sling, and in the game, you're holding this giant slingshot and putting the
Mhm.
bird in the slingshot, and then the bird like gets sailed through the air a bajillion, okay,
Yeah.
miles. Yeah.
So there's all of these different little aspects of that. So like the first thing that you as the user gets to interact with is the angle in which you shoot the bird. So is it a little bit of an angle? Is it a different like so you determine the angle and then you get to
Right,
see like, oh, where did that when I use that angle, what happened? And you get to see the
right.
trajectory that the bird shoots. Then the next aspect that you get to do as a user is you get to determine how fast or how aggressive you're shooting the bird. So that's another thing. And then when you do that, let's say you pull it all the way back, you get to see how fast it shoots and then how far it goes. So you're actually
Yes.
seeing this instantaneous. So there's all of these variables that you are interacting. And then the next part is what are these two things when you do them together? If I move this angle, but this level of intensity, what's going to happen? That kind of formative feedback
Mhm.
is critical to students learning math. And you make the choice, you change the choice slightly, and then you see what happens. And allowing kids to have that kind of playful approach to math is so pivotal. And this is where digital resources are so valuable, is they can see the kids making these incremental changes, both in angle and intensity, and the kid gets to see what happens. And then the next aspect is if you've ever played Angry Birds, like they're supposed to hit something and it's supposed to bounce off this and then bounce off that and then hit this thing. And so then you get to play with, okay, well, I have these two variables that I can change, but then how do they interact with the collective world that I'm shooting the bird into?
Mm.
And so this is when we talk about formative feedback. It's that. How do you let kids see what happens incrementally as they change different things inside of the mathematics world that they're living in?
Does that include like the ability to, at higher level mathematics, change variables and see some structure built,
Yeah.
some two-dimensional? Hmm, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
well, you talked earlier about like counting bricks. And so like one of the things that we want kids to do is say, okay, well, here's a pattern. What happens if this pattern goes on for a long time? Where would that lead us to? Like, well, how would that change? And getting kids to like start thinking like that, you're going to do that by letting them play with inputs.
Yeah, like if you measured the bricks and you needed to cover 2 miles with bricks, how many bricks would you need? Those kinds of questions would be like, I'd be interested in that if I had bricks actually physically in front of me. You know,
Mhm.
like for a lot of kids, it's just like these word games that are math. It's just, yeah, that's not very much fun in reality. Okay, so that formative feedback was number 6. Number 7 is that when you're looking for a high quality math curriculum, you should be looking for one that embraces productive struggle in learning. So let's talk about that for just a little bit. Like when I think about productive struggle, I think about I'm trying to get something right and I keep getting it wrong and no one's really helping me, but maybe they're giving me a little feedback. But what kind of feedback? Like you can't just go, well, here's the answer.
Right. So like you're like letting your choice have the natural consequence that the choice would have would be like the feedback that we're constantly talking about. But one of the things I am constantly saying with productive struggle, like so like there's all this like, oh, here's what productive struggle is. Here's what non-productive struggle is. Everyone has these like ways of like describing that. And what I think is the easiest way to describe the difference between struggle and productive struggle is simply the story that the kid is telling
Wait, say that
themselves.
again. Say that again. The difference between struggle and productive
Yeah, so
struggles.
the way that I would describe the difference between struggle and productive struggle is simply the story that the kid is telling themselves. If they're
Hmm.
telling themselves, I can do it, then they are struggling productively. If they're telling themselves, I cannot do it, that is unproductive struggle. And so it's actually the narrative arc that the student is having right at any one moment is what's going to determine the level of struggle that the student is comfortable with. And one of the ways that you can create a really positive, meaningful narrative arc for the kids inside of productive struggle is to make them believe they can do it. And so, one of the powers of having games is kids naturally believe that, hey, this is a game, therefore it's meant to be beaten, therefore I can beat it. I was supposed to, it's designed for someone like me to beat. So the power of like having these games that we've built is that the kids believe they can beat them and they will struggle very hard for a very long time to figure them out. And so when we talk about like how do you embrace productive struggle, well, one, we've got to give the teacher the courage to get out of the way and give the teacher the courage to let the kids play games that might feel unproductive to the teacher because we have a particular timeline as a teacher, but are very, very effective for the student. And so when we talk about building a curriculum, we're saying, how do we leave space for that kind of struggle? And how do we encourage the teacher to let that struggle happen because there's such self-belief around games?
I like this. This is good. This is a good seven. I almost would want to say before we end off here that there would be some awareness by the outcome that the student has built the schema from the results that they're getting and the speed with which they can then get results. So let's say they're in a puzzle or a game for quite a while with Mind
Mhm.
Education's various puzzles and various things, teaching certain concepts. And the teacher will be able to know, obviously, they went through this one part, they struggled with it and kept going through the same loop for like 57 times. But then the next two loops, similar in nature, were fast. That would
Mhm.
tell me that the child has built the schema. They now understand fractions or addition or subtraction or multiplication because I can confidently say I saw them go through something and then faster and faster get through it. And now they're nailing it every time. I'm good. I'm good. That kid gets it. Right. Am I
Mhm.
right with about that?
Yeah, I mean, you just effectively described mastery-based programming, and that's
Oh,
exactly what we need in math
good for me.
education. Like we want mastery. It's not good enough to just say, okay, well, they've done it long enough. We got to move on. No, we want a kid to master it, and if it means to go a little bit slower, then great, we'll do that.
Yeah. And in my experience, some people are faster in some parts than others.
Hmm.
And doesn't mean anything if they're slow once in a while or how fast they are later. It just, yeah. Well, this has been really interesting. So we have our seven. We have look for a foundation on neuroscience, a what's effective across all student groups, that it empowers the educator, that it cultivates joy in actually doing math, like obviously, that's important, and then promotes mathematical discourse, and then leverages formative feedback, and finally embraces productive struggle. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yeah. And
I
if
like it.
you want to experience these things, like I said, we have free puzzle talks that we have available that are designed to be either like full lessons or micro lessons that teachers can leverage and just kind of see exactly what we're talking about when we say these seven things.
Okay, I like it. Okay, did we miss anything really important? Because I think people do want to know. Right now, there's a lot of schools and districts out there that are saying to themselves, okay, I have 57 math programs. Some of them are just pieces, like somebody scanned in the scrap of an old textbook and it's sitting there in my
Mhm.
digital library as a school or district, and that's like a piece. And then there's full programs like what you have, and then there's other little mini widgety things. I mean, I was just looking at a district in Cincinnati that has unbelievable numbers of little apps that do like one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like one game, whereas you guys are like this collection of complete scaffolded, it's like a Disneyland world of learning math. Um, so people are saying to themselves right now, the economy and and we're buying so much stuff and I want to narrow down. So I really think this was a positive podcast for people to listen in. I hope we get a lot of good feedback on it. But they're looking like, what are my metrics? So I'm glad we did this. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think, well, one, if you understand it as an adult right away, then it was made for you. If
Yeah.
you have a hard time understanding it, then it's probably made for kids. And that's a good aspect to kind of like to gauge like, was this made to like pull the wool over my eyes and get me to purchase it, or was it made to drive student thinking?
Well, you just added another whole dimension and an hour more to this podcast because 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 now I'm thinking to myself, that is like the ultimate truth right there. There's so many, many, many administrators in education. And I apologize to them for saying this to them as they're listening to this, but they're buying things to teach kids that they understand easily and let's be real, cater to their adultness
Mhm.
and the years and years and years they spent getting educated, um, and maybe actually add a level of mysticism to math that makes it sound like they're important.
Yeah.
And I apologize again to the educational listening to this, but you got to really step back and ask yourself, is my being self-important actually going to be the thing that causes the kid to learn? Whereas what you're saying, and I love this, is that if it's aimed at the kids, like it goes straight into like something that they can do, then it's a completely different angle. It maybe doesn't come with 67 white papers flanking it on the screen to prove every little point, and which
Mhm.
would bore me to tears anyway. But it's definitely something that they can do, and it's going to get them through. I think this is a really critical piece. I wish it would have been number 8 or maybe 9. Remember the other
Well,
one?
if you want another one, here's something else that I just personally believe.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're going to buy something that it's likely that for 10 years your district is going to have this thing.
No, yeah. Oh, yeah.
When you evaluate, and every single curriculum person would be like team or product developer would be okay with this. You should say, okay, well, here's the 5 that we're interested in, or 8, or whatever, and say, I want to spend an entire day with you as that curriculum, and I want you to talk me through so much of it. I want you to give me the philosophy that undergirds what you did, and spend an entire day with these curriculum publishers just so you can
Yeah.
kind of see. Because you know what, it's really easy to put on a dog and pony show for an hour or two, but if I have to
Mhm.
spend 8 hours with you, that whole charade falls apart.
Oh, easily. You just indicted all the teachers pay teachers shoppers too, because there's the majority of teachers have really not been trained to be instructional designers. And they're definitely not digital instructional designers. Now, there might be some people listening right now and going, well, who cares? I teach math the old-fashioned way in the classroom, and I even have chalkboards still. But instead of a whiteboard. But I will say this, that the average classroom's got 40% mixed ability. So every teacher in America, whatever subject, however many units they're carrying, they've got kids that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 grades behind. They're teaching ninth grade. The kid's
Mhm.
sitting there in second grade level of ability, can't add and subtract, and they're trying to teach them algebra. So they have to have some tool. And I don't even want to call what Mind Education does a tool because it is fully evolved courseware. It is digitally designed to actually educate and then have the teacher validate along the way and find things that the kid gets totally stuck on. They're fixers. Teachers become the ultimate fixers. Not that they're not doing the regular teaching as well, but what I'm saying is that teachers, if you're not looking at true digital instructional design, which isn't even instructional design, which if you're not even in instructional design in the first place, you're down here at zero. And then step 1 would be any sort of instructional design, but the highest level, step 2, would be actual digital instructional design to purvey learning. And I think you guys are even beyond that because you're at the neuroscience level of how something causes in a game-based way learning to occur. So I'm going to have to create a scale now. Look what you did to me, of all these things, Dan. So anyway, so I just want to make that comment because I think it's really real that you have to start looking at that, the very heart of your practice, if you can't get teachers anyway, which we're going to lose. My research is showing we're going to lose another 6% going into the next year. Over this summer, we're going to have enough retire that going into the new year, we're going to have another 6%, which is going to put us at over 30%. We'll be 31, 32% of classrooms in America can't get a teacher.
Hmm.
So we're reaching extremes of difficulty in that alone. So you got to augment some way. You might as well find something this good. Okay, well, this has been super fun. You've been super fun. Dan, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Okay, good. All right. So thank you for listening to another episode of the Learning Council's podcast. This has been your host, LeiLani Cawthon. Keep listening, keep learning.